Welcome to Season 3 of Connecting with Purpose. In our first 2 seasons, we explored how leading and living with purpose unlocks unique potential for us and our teams. This season, we're diving into how purpose helps us navigate change, build resilience, and elevate our ongoing performance, well-being, and impact. A special focus I'm really excited about is to highlight the transition of elite athletes into new opportunities. By raising awareness around this largely untapped talent pool, we'll bridge opportunities with businesses to create meaningful connections, drive value, and deliver lasting impact. Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in. Digit Murthy, who has just got tons of experience across sports. She's currently runs her own consulting organisation, consulting on various sports projects in women's sports, and she's held all sorts of roles, SVP roles, president roles in professional and amateur sports, really driving forward opportunities for women in life, leadership and sport. She's co-founder and president of the Pay It Forward Sports Foundation, which I'm also excited to dive into. So to say that Digit's passionate about creating opportunities for women is somewhat of an understatement. And in addition to managing all of these roles and creating all of these opportunities, he also happens to be a mother of 6 children, and as a father of 2 young boys playing the old dad game, I am completely humbled. So welcome, Digit. It's brilliant to have you.
Thanks for having me, Mark. And we do have one grandbaby too, so a little girl, Olive.
Oh, so, brilliant! Congratulations. Yeah. Well, look, the first question, I mean, we usually start with magic moments, and we're going to, I promise, but I just want to understand first, like, how do you do it? How do you do all this stuff?
Okay, so I have a ton of energy. When I wake up in the morning, people are like, Dig, how do you do it? I'm like, I just do it. I'm passionate about women's sports. I'm passionate about life. I love people. I love communicating a message. And I don't know, like, I eat well. I don't drink a lot of alcohol. I've really learned throughout my whole life on how to manage it. And every day I learn, grow. And that's really the magic elixir to life, is enjoying it and learning every day and growing every day. And I try to lead every day, but it's fun. I love life.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to think I share some of those traits, but I definitely got to do a better job exuding the energy through the screen. So that's the first order of business. Okay, so let's get into magic moments, which is our listeners are familiar with this, but just as a quick kind of refresh, it's really just looking back on life. You can do professional, personal, but just looking back on life, and it's really about 3 moments that stand out that were either developmental or pivotal. They could have been incredibly positive. They could have even been incredibly challenging. But looking back with the hindsight of time, if you had to score them on a scale of 1 out of 10, you'd give them a 10 out of 10 for the impact they had on your life for what came next. And the question is, if you can think of 3 magic moments, firstly, like, what was it about each of them that made the magic? And if you had to give them a name, what would you call them?
Ooh, if I had to give them a name. I think the first one was when I was in high school. At the time, I guess I'm going to call it the fork in the road, right? The reason I'm going to call it the fork in the road was I was living with my best friend's family at the time. My parents had split, and I was a very good hockey player, and I was part of, this was in 1978, 79 year, okay? And I was a really good athlete, and Title IX was just getting its teeth. And I was recruited by the 3 scholarship schools for ice hockey. One was UNH, one was Northeastern, and one was Providence College. I had also had an opportunity to go to Colby College at the time, which was one of the top programs in the country, if you can believe it. They're D3 now. And I was marching along on my path of, going to school, being number 1, going to the top school in the country, which was University of New Hampshire at the time, full scholarship. I was going there. And I was living with my best friend at the time, whose brother went to Yale. And Cornell University came in last minute, and they started calling me. Somehow they found my number, and they called my best friend's house. And my best friend's brother was home at the time, and he saw a note on the refrigerator that says, or wherever it was, by the phone, because at that time they were the rotary dial, or you know, you had the
Yeah.
cord, and it said, digit, call Cornell coach. And I wasn't calling him because I was like, I'm going to UNH. I'm done with the applications. Like, you know, I'm first generation college, Mark. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. No one was guiding me. And he took that note and he put it in my face. And he said, you are going to call this guy. And I'm like, nope, going to UNH. Number one, want to go win a championship? He's like, no, you're going to call. Cornell University is an Ivy League school. You will call that guy. And the rest is history, because if I had chosen to not talk to the Cornell coach, I wouldn't have been part of the first recruiting class at Cornell, and my life and trajectory would have changed. I mean, I walked in rooms when, you know, I got my jobs and they would introduce me as the Cornell girl, right? It was like a massive like moniker of confidence that gave me, you know, a leg up right out of the gate. And I was only 17 years old when this all happened. I think, you know, it was crazy times. It was crazy days. So that was number one.
Awesome.
Um, Number two would be, um, after I graduated from Cornell, I had a really, really, really good job at a company called Data General. This was in the early 80s. And it was, we're in a manufacturing firm, and I was making a lot of money. I was commuting back and forth from my house in Rhode Island. I was engaged to be married. I was driving a BMW to back and forth to work every day, making a lot of money. I was a modern day yuppie. I was, you know, like I said, but I hated it. Like I hated the confinement of corporate. I hated the grind of just, I mean, I was making a ton of money. I had my own house. You know, I was living the dream, and I just didn't like it. And they had this thing called a reduction in force. This was back in the day when they actually gave you a paycheck. When they got rid of you, they gave you a paycheck and they let you go on your merry way. And I wasn't slated to get that. I actually asked for it because I wanted to do a career change. And it was kind of a slap in the face to my, you know, my partner at the time, or my husband, my, you know, ex now, that I just volunteered for it. I'm like, I want to volunteer. You're going to save someone else's job. You need to give that to me. And they fought me on it because I was on the fast track in management as a woman, the only woman. I had a promotion every year. It was out of control. Like it was printing money. And I just knew I didn't like it. So I wanted to go back to school and be a phys ed teacher. And I did it. And it was like an open door then. And that's how I ended up getting the Brown University hockey job, because like the alchemist kind of thing, it just like you just keep following the journey and it just keeps revealing itself to you. And in 1987 I became the assistant coach at Brown University, and then in 1989 I became the head coach. But without leaving that job, it wouldn't have opened a whole nother opportunity for me to walk through that door and be the first full-time women's hockey coach at Brown. So I would call that, you know, maybe, you know, taking, you know, trading careers or something like that. And then, or, you know, maybe taking a chance. And then the last one, you know, which was really moving to me as a woman, and as a woman career person, was having my first child, um, and being a role model and a leader for the next generation women. I know now, and you know, it's not really a career move, but it's career vision, and it's, you saw those commercials. You can bring home the bacon, you can fry it up in the pan, and all that stuff back in the day, and you don't really want to do that, right? You want to actually do it all, but do it on your terms.
Mm.
And I feel like that's what I did at Brown, and I challenged the administration to have a women with kids. I changed my hours. Like I fought the athletic director at the time. He wanted me to work 9 to 5, and I'm like, no way. My ice time is like 6 to 10 at night. Like, don't even. Like, I'm gonna work my hours my way. You don't pay me what the men get paid. And I was a pain in his ass, to be honest. But what I did was I changed the respect level, I think, for women in coaching, the respect level at Brown. I did not care what people thought of me. I just plowed through, I mean, probably to my demise, like later on, because I was perceived down the road as a rebel rouser or as, I feel like I always had like the scarlet letter around my neck, like, stay away from her because she's trouble. But I embraced the trouble. I leaned into it because I felt like I was doing greater good for the women. Now you'll see Kara Mori, who's a mom. She coaches at Princeton. You'll see Cassie Turner, who's a mom. She coaches at Quinnipiac. Katie King. This is my coaches tree. Jody McKenna at Wesleyan. Just Liz Keedy, who now is the national team coach. Like I was the first to do it. I was the first then to and we can talk about this later, but I ended up leaving my husband, for a woman later on, and I was one of the first to be down in Naples with my partner, saying, "Hey, this is not like a bad thing. Like this happens in life." And anyways, I've done a lot of firsts, and I've been unapologetic in my approach and genuine and authentic, and that's who I am, and I don't apologize for it. And because I'm a woman, sometimes I get a little punished for it, but who cares? Don't care.
Well, you're blazing the trail for everyone else at that point. And so the first moment was off the back of a bit of a nudge and kind of probably opening up a door that completely reframed probably your perspective on what opportunities might be out there. The second one you took it into your own hands, right? It's like I'm doing it my way. I'm yes, I can ride this gravy train and but that's not what I want to do. What was it about that corporate life and opportunity that was filled with success, right? But what was it about it that success wasn't enough? What was it about it that just wasn't right for you?
Well, number one, it was really easy. It wasn't hard. It was like I didn't have. I don't know. Like I soared in it, and I think I like doing things that are difficult and hard. Like as I look back on my life, and I just read the energy of my lack of happiness. I think I always put mission over money as I look back in my lifetime. I mean, now it's like you should have put a little money more into the money part, but that's okay. Money will come, and when you identify your success in life, you can identify it different ways. Like a lot of people just identify success as monetary success, and I always define my success as impact success. And what impact am I making every day on people, on the process, on the planet, really? And I really believe that without Digit Murphy on the planet, and you can call it ego, you can call it anything. I don't think women's sports, especially in ice hockey, would have achieved as much because I'm a pusher and I'm a grinder and I don't stop. And people to this day go, "How do you keep doing it?" And it's because I'm passionate about the mission of making sure women have a voice. And I use sports as that platform. And I don't know, it's just in my DNA. I mean, we started the NCAA tournament back when I was a coach. Like we literally started a tournament called the American Hockey Coaches Association tournament, sponsored by USA Hockey, that actually had impact on the NCAA taking it over in the early 2000s. And that was born out of a conversation after a camp with a bunch of guys around the table and a bunch of women, and Digit Murphy banging her hands on the table like she always did and say, "Why can't we have women's national hockey?" Because we didn't have an NCAA sport when I played it. And it was wrong to me that we didn't. So we copied the basketball model, and that's how the NCAA. Everyone's like, "Dig, how did you guys in hockey?" Because other sports would call me and they say, "How did you guys in hockey get it done so quickly?" And had USA Hockey not created that tournament model where we took 3 teams from Boston and 1 team from Minnesota, and they sponsored it for $250,000 a year for 3 years. If that hadn't happened back in the late 90s, women's hockey wouldn't have been as prevalent as it is today, because the 98 Olympics catapulted the success of the sport. And people forget that history. And I'm here to tell the story. And I didn't even know I was going to tell the story, but those are the kind of things, those magical moments that make stuff happen in the future that you're not even thinking about. And that's kind of what I do. I innovate and I create and I challenge.
Well, it sounds like it sounds like there's so many magic moments, and it's funny because I obviously have a good amount of guests on this, and the magic moments is an activity we do with all of our clients as we've taken them through this kind of what we call live and lead with purpose experience. And for some people, it's so hard to think of these moments, but then once you get one, you get another, and you get another. And I can just imagine you have a Rolodex of these by decade, and there's probably a book in there. But what I wanted to do was just connect the dots between that and purpose. And in the simplest terms, we think about purpose as just what is it you're doing when you're your very best? How do you authentically bring that to life, and what difference does it make? And we look at it as
I mean,
passion plus impact plus application. Like what would you say your
I,
purpose is, or if you were going to break it down?
well, my purpose in life is to create opportunities for women using sports as a leadership platform. It's that simple. I've been doing that since day one. I look back on all of my clippings because, every once in a while I'll come through one and it's always like, it's not about sports, it's about life. I remember that was a headline in the Providence Journal when they were covering us back in the 2000s. And because that's what it's always been about me. It's not about sports, it's about life. How do you teach life lessons? How do you teach um, the journey is important. It's not, the success isn't winning the championship. Sometimes it's the everyday wins that you get. It's very simple to say it, but I always put it into practice, right? I put it into practice like the story I just told. It's like, how do we take what we have and make it better for more people, right? So I've done that with Brown. We went from worst to first. We put them on the map. We went to the NCAA tournament. After I was done with a 24-year career at Brown, we did it with the Boston Blades. We won 2 out of 3 championships. Then we took a model and we brought that hockey model to lacrosse to start the first professional women's lacrosse league. That was what I did with my partner. I've taken we took the Chinese national team program in 2017 and we built it we built a 5-year strategic plan so that they could have success in the Olympics in 2022. And it's not the normal model, Mark. I use the women's model as an example of organic growth, as leadership, ambassadorship, to create a different paradigm so that we can shift the conversation to women. And it's really hard for people to grasp that because they're so used to looking at sports through the male lens that we cannot or we will not hear a woman's voice or look at it through a female lens because we don't value women like we should yet. And what I try to do is put it right in the mirror of people and be like, think about it this way. Look in the mirror, my mirror, which I look back on it, is a woman. And a lot of people in the country, including women, cannot do that. And that's what I challenge people to do. Look at it differently, look at through a women's sports lens, grow a women's audience differently than men's sports. Make certain things important. Make the community important, which is why I work on these facilities projects. Because if I can bring the message to a whole community and use sports to empower a platform of health and wellness, mental health and physical health, proper eating habits, proper sleeping habits, showing up, all those things can be used to build life skills. Sports can be used as a teaching tool for life. And it's always been like in my DNA to do this. And I've evolved my message over time because it just becomes more and more clear, right? More and more clear to me as I age.
Huh. It's funny. We'll have a chat off camera at the end, but it's actually ridiculous how many things we share in terms of the corporate trajectory and getting into youth sports and bringing opportunities. Mine was to young people, but not just to women, but more, well, as 50% girls that participated. But what I wanted to, so I've kind of got my own view on this, but you've got way more experience than me in this, and you've stayed in sports, and I've kind of morphed out of sports a little bit, which is when the objective is the mission, which is driven by impact. The process is about making things better, taking them from worst to first or from wherever to best. How would you break that process down? Like, what is the model that's worked for you?
I think I'll tell you the model that doesn't work and then we'll come to the model that
Hmm.
works. The model that doesn't work, and it took me a long time to realize this, is what I call the yell and tell model, right? Because I said so, it doesn't work with girls and women. It might actually work with boys. I haven't coached them as much. Women are very driven by the why. They're driven by feelings and I think loyalty, investing in them. And when I first started coaching, it was really about who my role models were, which was Bill Parcells, Bobby Knight, um, Mike Ditka, all the people that were like yelling and screaming at people, right? So I'm like, oh, that's what you do when you coach. You just yell and scream as loud as you can, and you win. And I was lucky enough to coach a bunch of women who were never coached, who were embracing anything I said because they were just hungry for knowledge and information. And a lot of them played boys sports, so they could hear my voice. But as the population evolved, what happened was I didn't evolve with the population because I was comfortable in that space. I think that's a lot of the reason why I had to leave Brown, was because I felt that my identity was in the yell and tell, and I wasn't confident enough to get outside of that identity. And looking back, it's easy to see, but when you're in it, it's hard. So one of the best things that ever happened was, me leaving Brown and being able to reinvent myself as a coach, because it never really felt right to me to yell and tell. Never felt right, but I didn't trust my gut because I was having such great success in the yell and tell, like Herb Brooks, like doing Herbies. And my players to this day love to tell the stories about the adversity that they went through or the tough love they went through. And I also found out later in life, though, that you can do it the other way. You can do it the Digit Murphy way, which is love wins, which is collaborating, which is asking questions to the team and see what they have the answers to, and then morphing that information to having impact on your team. It was, coaching a player like Kelly Stack, who was the coach of the Olympic team, and using her as a partner in the success of the team. It's giving them the keys to the car, giving them the guardrails, and let them drive. Like, that's true coaching. That's true leadership to me. And I really, was an immature coach at Brown, and I couldn't get out of it because I didn't have the confidence to get out of it because I didn't have any mentors. You're just trying to keep your head above water, and it's it's a lost opportunity for women in coaching. And I'm telling you right now, Mark, it happens to this day because we're still immature as women. Um, People are not used to hearing a woman's voice in the coaching ranks, and that bothers me, which is why I'm on a mission to change that through coaches education and broadcast education with the facilities that we're running. Because you have to be comfortable with a woman's voice telling you what to do if the whole planet is going to succeed.
Yeah, well, 100%. I mean, I think that there's obviously issues. There's obviously issues around how people listen, right, based upon who's giving the message. But I think that ultimately the message that's been given and the approach that's been given is what wins people over, regardless of whether it's a man or a woman coaching. But my view, from my experience of coaching boys and girls more than men and women, is 100% around the why and the purpose and the feelings and loyalties you said. To me, for the girls, there was always this desire for connection, which comes down to loyalty, but this true desire for connection and belonging, because that didn't come for girls in the same way organically at school as it might, and sports provided this incredible vehicle for that. And there was also this kind of insatiable curiosity with the girls, like less ego and more just wanting to learn and sap it up and take it on board. And so the approach of this love wins approach works, and that works with boys and girls, by the way, but it works especially well with girls because challenging them, giving the opportunity to try something, asking them questions about what went well, what could we have done better, asking what other people thought to that, giving them the autonomy to just have the freedom to try stuff out, and then giving them feedback, and a bit of love feedback and a bit of, hey, this is what we could have done better feedback. What do you think? What could you do differently next time? And I think we kind of embrace that largely through this overall kind of game sense approach to coaching. And that was just our model, and this was with boys and girls in rugby. But ultimately, yeah, I 100% agree with the love wins approach. And what I just want to make a quick connection to, and I'd be interested in your thoughts in, whether you're comparing back to the corporate world or comparing to any kind of engagements that you do with executives and corporates, that my view is that wins in the office as well. And yet it's something that people aren't comfortable with. What's your view on, you connect to the dots between kind of sports and life, but what are some of the lessons of coaching sports that actually would work really well in the boardroom and with the teams at work?
Yeah, I forgot to mention the F word, which is fun.
Oh, you had me worried
People
there for
like
a
to have
second.
fun.
I thought you were going to
That's
give me
why
a
I
bit
said
of
it
yell
like
and
that.
tell action with the F word.
Nope. I did it on purpose. Um, one of the things that I was really successful at doing, I told you about my corporate job immediately out of college, was, and this was a long time ago, but it worked. We had a lot of fun at work. I would let them play music. Like, this is the production floor. So I was a supervisor on the production floor, and we built, computers. And um, like, these Portuguese ladies didn't even speak the language, but they spoke the language of dance and music. And I would just like, woo, put it on. And they'd be like, and I would dance around, and I was like their boss, right? So it was like, it's getting on a level that people can identify you as not just their leader, but they're the advocate. I'm your advocate. What do you need? What can I do to help you? And I think this hierarchy approach to management that I'm just going to identify as very male. It's very male. It's on top of each other. It's a ladder. And I've done some research on some of the women that I actually have met. Her name is Frances Hesselbein. A friend of mine is very connected with her. She was the leader of the Girl Scouts. She's got the Medal of Honor from Bill Clinton. Like, she just died. She was an octogenarian. She was an octogenarian. Is that it? Like, when you're like over, what's it? Centenarian? When you're like 100 and older?
Yeah, it must be. Yeah.
Like, you're like 100. She was like 102 or 104 when she died. She had this methodology that talked about a circle. Like, you have to have 360-degree feedback that they talk about now, but she was doing this back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I kind of believe in, kind of that circular leadership, because you can't serve your audience unless you actually help them. And as a leader, if you're helping them or you're giving them something that they want, that helps them. I mean, I did crazy things like, I would be like, and this is kind of crazy, but I would let, like, my supervisor, if we hit a certain number, I'd be like, hey, take a couple hours off, take my car, go joyriding, go wash it though, make sure you wash it, like things like that, like, just to keep it real and to give them something. And this was in the 80s, it was different. And then when I talk to corporate people, it's taking like real life role play models, and like, you have to be real. Like, you can't be the boss and not be appreciative, and you have to understand people's value. It's like, if I had a power play player and I never said great job, that power play player would never achieve the greatness that they did. And when you're correcting people, it's got to be with respect, right? And you have to be very thoughtful in your approach to correcting people, or talking to people. Like, hey, you sucked at that. No, it's, hey, let's talk about what didn't work here and why it didn't work. Now, on the bench, you don't have that kind of you don't have that kind of time. So you're like, hey, just take a seat over there. We'll talk about that later, right? And you put them on the bench. But you can't do that in corporate. So you have to kind of put them on the bench in corporate in a way that doesn't humiliate them but sends the message. I mean, those kind of things are hard to do, but you can't be afraid of the conversation of holding people accountable. And I think a lot of times people in corporate will just rather fire someone than shift them to a different role that might impact the company better. Like, as a leader, you have to have your finger on the pulse of conversations so that you can lead them. And it's not just about a number, it's about knowing your people and making sure they're creating success for your organization. Because, what is that? People, process, and I can't remember the other one that all these like fancy guys talk about. But the people in my world are the most important.
It's usually people, process, and technology, but that for most companies and 80% of the clients we work with, people is the biggest challenge / opportunity. It's also generally the largest investment. And while everything you've said, right, just makes complete sense, and I just think it's the power of simplicity often in these situations, which is knowing your people, treating them as human beings, right? And the contradiction that represents for all of us, because yes, we want to show care, but we also need to be candid. We want to have a love wins approach, but we've got to hold people accountable. And we also, when we're trying to stand up for our team, we need to advocate for them. We need to champion for them. We need to have difficult conversations for them. That's not an easy thing to do, to speak up and really back those people without being aggressive, right? And coming up with the wrong approach. And I think that it's those, what people would call soft skills, that is, to me, is just, that's where all the opportunity is in humanity, and that's where all the opportunity is in work and in sports.
And I'm just going to go out on a limb and say a lot of women are uniquely qualified with our soft skills, and we don't utilize them properly, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, talk to me more about that. Why is it that you think? Well, there's obviously some genetic and neuroscience behind this stuff as well, of course, which I'm not qualified to talk about. But why is it you think women are more naturally adept at these sort of soft skills that can potentially get the best out of people, and yet you kind of alluding to the fact that maybe not actually being able to put those into practice? What are the soft skills that generally you feel women are more naturally adept at, and then what's holding them back from kind of really opportunities, making the most of those?
So the first question is, what uniquely qualifies women? Hopefully that can lead, and that is that we see things. We have this ability to see things before they're going to happen. I don't know how it works, but when you heard the old adage, your mom has eyes in the back of her head. I don't know if you've ever heard people say that, but back in the day,
that to my 4-year-old every day. Yeah,
correct. And it's because we've been gifted with the spidey sense of seeing danger. I'm just telling you, it's just men I know can't see it. And the way I knew it was when I would go. So I did the commentating from the '98 Olympics. I had to go on trips and everything when I was younger. I had my kids and they were little. And twice that I went on my trips, my kids got stitches. And I know it's because men don't anticipate some of the stuff. And I know that that's a crazy example, but you don't see that door going to open into that kid's head. It's just not how you're wired. And I think women can sense and feel, or certain women can sense and feel what's happening in a room while it's happening. Like, I know when my team is going to have a bad period. When I go into that locker room and I between periods, I'm like, oh man, this energy is just bad. Like, you feel the energy. So you have to adjust your energy based on what you're feeling. So if I know they're low energy, I go in and give them a pep talk. If I know they're all over the map and now they're going to be like scattered, I got to focus them. So that's why women make great teachers, right? They go into a classroom, they can organize a classroom, they can organize a birthday party. It's what we're gifted in leading for whatever reason. So I think when you apply those soft skills of empathy, communication, emotional intelligence to the corporate world, it makes everyone better. So I just, and then I can't remember, what was the second one? What can we do
so what's holding women back? And there's obviously internal and external factors.
Women hold women back. Women hold women back by themselves. Okay, they're very risk averse. They're very family first. They're very unselfish. Okay, and we hold ourselves back because we do things like, well, I'm not going to go for that promotion because if I go for that promotion, I'm going to have more responsibility. And I don't want to blame the victim here, but I'm telling you, I've seen these things in practice. And if I go for that promotion, I may have to work on the road. I may have to travel. It's not good for my family. So they put the family first. Okay.
Yeah.
And again, we talked about it earlier in my life mission, which was I put the mission first. I put myself first. I put the family first. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to go back to school to be a gym teacher because it was easier for me to navigate my life. Um, but the system holds them back for lack of calling it the patriarchy. I'm going to call it the system.
Yeah.
The way that the system in corporate is managed is is uncomfortable for women. From the way that we network, from the way that we go into the cigar rooms to make the deals, to the way that we um, exclude women from conversations at the beginning of a talk when you open a talk and all you're talking about sports and women aren't watching sports on the weekend, they're doing other things. Those little cues hold women back from the conversation. And they're and I really believe that a more corporate friendly environment for women is holding women back from succeeding in corporate. And number three is we just don't value women for not having the same skills as men. Women are not great negotiators. I wish I could say they were better. We try to force them to be great negotiators instead of understanding that we're not and we're selfless, and to actually value that loyalty. A woman, instead of taking advantage of it, they take advantage of it, and people be like, well, that's not business. Well, you know what? Maybe business has to change to welcome women into it, because guess what, guys and companies, you're getting a lot out of your women. Give them the credit they deserve. Don't just take from them because you can, give to them because you can. And you will see the company will be valued more as women achieve more greatness in your company.
100% agree. And I kind of close the, so I just brought my notepad. I'd close the loop between those two elements and just say I think and generally feel that I talk about 5 fundamental truths, and you can apply this to a sports team, you can apply it to a business, right? And this is that every person that's within a business wants these 5 things and needs them foundationally to perform at their best, to thrive, to so on and so forth. And that is, firstly, they want to feel connected. Secondly, they want to actually feel like they belong, not just trying to fit in, but actually truly belong. They want to have some meaning, understand why they're doing it. They want to contribute value. Like, there's not many people that don't want to do their best or don't want to get better or don't want to add value to the team or the business or whatever it is. And the last is that they want to feel valued for that contribution. And the issue that you've talked about is, firstly, women may not feel completely connected. They certainly don't feel like they belong. There may be meaning in their role, but it probably depends on what the role is and where they're working. The context around that is very important for everybody. They obviously want to contribute value, but there's a misunderstanding of what is the value that they can contribute, and therefore they're not getting valued for the contribution that they make because they're not being asked to contribute in a way that aligns to them being their best self.
We need to go on the road. We need to go on the road to all these companies and tell them what the heck they're doing. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
I appreciate you narrowing it down to those 3 things. So okay, so let's close this out. We're going to close out on you, actually. So just one last thing before we end with you, which is I guess if you the magic wand or the silver bullet or like the ideal scenario, like if you just had an unlimited budget to speak everywhere, teach everyone everything, like what would be the one message that you want to get across to really level the playing field for women so they can truly thrive in work, sport, and life?
Well, I think that I'm really all about women's voices being heard in a meaningful way, an impactful way. So you just would be to value women and value the message. And the way I would implement it, because I always implement these things, it's not about my message. It's not about people listening to me. People should listen to me because I have a great message. I have a great audience. I have a microphone. But it would be to amplify that message through, because I have a limited budget. You gave me the magic wand. Okay. What I would do is I would go to every NCAA program through the whole Title IX process, and I would endow every women's sport, pro, that I could, all of them. And I would say the only way that you can get these programs endowed is if you have a women's head coach and staff. And then what you would do is you would mandate that women coach the women's teams. Okay. You can cross over later, but if we mandate the women coaching women's teams, you amplify that voice, you amplify the opportunities, you amplify the message through many women, not just one voice. So
Okay.
I'm like the pyramid scheme. It's like the pyramid scheme. Like you take one message and
Let's
you
do it.
blast it
Okay,
out to
so
everyone
to
else.
anyone that wants to contribute anything, any millionaires or billionaires watching, you want to make an impact, you believe in diversity and belonging and inclusion, and by the way, women are part of leveling the playing field on that. Let's get some money into these programs and mandate that women's coaches are there. And
Yeah.
hey, let's see. But that would be
And
your
can I
wish.
tell you how that works? Can I tell you how that worked in Minnesota? And I know we don't have a lot of time, but I want to quick tell you this story. 30 years ago, there was something called the Mighty Ducks Bill in Minnesota. And the Mighty Ducks Bill said they wanted to build, I can't remember how many hundreds of rinks. It could have been 80. I don't know what the number was. But because Title IX was in play during that time of the bill, this was in the 90s, the early 90s, every arena that had a boys hockey team had to have a girls hockey team. Okay. And for 30 years, these teams have had to grow women's opportunities. That didn't only grow the women's teams, it did grow the coaching pool, but it grew the amount of athletes that were women. Now, when you look at the PWHL and their biggest fans were in Minnesota, their biggest game, they had 10,000 people watching women's hockey. That's because it started 30 years ago when you implemented a program that grew the pool of women athletes and women and men now who cared about women's hockey. And now it comes to fruition 30 years later, which is why you need to make that, the equal opportunity mandate like a Title IX, because it just doesn't happen. It's not happening in corporate. It's why it doesn't happen in corporate, because money's involved. The second money is involved, all bets are off. You can do anything you want.
Yeah, it
Obviously, what you
can't
see
just
in
be the
England.
carrot. There's got to be the stick, and sometimes you need the rules to be in place to force people to come into line. Yeah, I completely understand. So, all right, we're going to finish up on you. So, I've got two questions. Fast forward to the end of the road. How would you define a life well lived for Digit?
Life well lived. I've already lived it. I always say I can die any day now. I've had a big impact on women's sports. A life well lived would be, seeing some of the things that we've executed, right, and see them actually exponentially now grow, right? Just
Mm,
like that Mighty Ducks example I just gave you. Just like I'm still not, I'm not convinced that it's growing at the rate that we need to grow it. Women's coaches, women's sports opportunities. It's still growing by way of the way men want it to grow. And I'll give you an example. This new PWHL league was bought out by one male owner, Mark Walters, and Billie Jean King is the woman that's part of this. Okay. You have 6 teams that are owned by one man, and they have the president, who is named Stan, implementing women's hockey. Okay. And what I'm telling you is that when it's born in this vision of men's sports, you're missing out on a whole other vision of women's sports. So, what I would like to see is all women's sports almost in that Angel City model, in the NWSL, which is run by Jessica Berman. Like, you're starting to see the evolution of women's sports start to be born with a women's vision. So, hopefully, a life well lived for me will see everything seen through a female lens in women's sports. And of course, this is about me, but my family, and seeing like Olive like playing hockey, and my granddaughter and seeing more of my grandchildren and my legacy played out in my kids, and maybe my daughter taking over all my things, and I have two daughters, and and my partner, having fun with all this too. So I'm still not done yet. I still got another good 10, 20 years.
Well, that tees up the next question. Well, you might have already answered it. We've had the wish, and we've had this kind of redesigning women's sports for women's sports, right? As in through a women's lens that looks different to what success looks like for the men. And we could actually do a whole complete separate podcast on that. But the last question then is, what's the one thing that you haven't done yet that you want to get done?
That's a tough question. I think it would be being the distributor of the resources for women, like being at the table with a women's fund, like $100 million fund, and deciding where my impact, the impact that I see in women's sports, where I see the leagues that will have the most impact on the community and on women. And I think right now, unfortunately or fortunately for the women who are getting the money, it's pretty much distributed by men. And I think that would have the greatest impact on the future is if I could distribute the money. So I'd like to be at the table in a fund, some kind of capital fund where Digit Murphy's at the helm, and we're making the decisions on which next leagues are going to really make the best impact for women in the pro space. Because I think for women's sports in the NCAA, or maybe just even like banish the NCAA altogether, and I'd love to run the whole women's sports side of the NCAA. Split them in half. Let the men have one side, we'll take the other.
Love it. Well, there's no better way to end then. So we'll call it a day there. But Digit, thank you so much. The time has literally flown by on this. I really appreciated all your insights and sharing any passionate energy which just comes through. And I know you've got many more years of impact to make. So thank you for carving out some time for us here on Connecting with Purpose.
Yeah, it was amazing. And Mark, you're inspirational yourself, and it's great connection. I'm happy to come on any other time. And I do speaking engagements, and anyone that wants to hear the Digit Murphy message, just get on my website. I'm everywhere. I'm the only Digit Murphy in the world. So some people say good, some people say not so good.
That's a good point. Just to point everyone to the notes, because your website will be linked in there, your LinkedIn will be linked in there, but obviously through website, and we can put your email in there as well if you want, Digit, for folks to reach out. So and to somebody to write you a check for $100 million so you can get going with this fund.
Okay, let's go. Let's get the fun going.
Bring it
on. Thanks for the opportunity, Mark. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.